Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and happy New Year. Although it's been what two weeks now since New Year, we're a little bit late, but this is our first episode of the year, so we still have to say Happy New Year. And indeed, this is actually the first video of the channel, so like, yeah, it's something to celebrate, I guess, and also something we want to talk about. I would say quite something that affected my purchase decision over the last half a year, I would say. Rod probably know, and so it's something that I would like to talk about, and I want to share my views, and of course I want to share Rod's views, and also I want to see whether you agree or not with this particular topic. So without further ado, let's start talking about retro cameras. Okay, and let's say hi to some people first. And Robin was in the house. Hello, Robin, and Chuck, and Happy New Year. Yes, camera nerds.
What?
Oh yeah.
What?
yes. Well, I guess we are all guilty of that. Apart from gas, like gear acquisition syndromes. I think we all suffer a little bit of that. And yeah, I can tell you that I got a new camera, which I will talk a little bit about that. Not in this particular video, but something's coming, so I'll have to talk about it when the time comes. But yeah, it's very exciting about this retro thing that is everybody's talking about over the last few years. And Rod is in the industry, reviewing gears and talking about camera news for the past, God knows how long now, 3-4 decades now, Rod, is it?
It's 300 or 400 years by my reckoning. Yeah.
Well, you look good for that.
Well, since digital cameras became a thing, really, since about 99, 2000. So yeah, pretty much ever since then.
I was doing my nappies then.
Yeah.
Anyway, joking aside, and yeah, I think that we all can agree. You don't have to disagree, just agree that retro thing, whether you like it or not, is here. And I think it is something that is helping the camera industry in some ways. And just talking about Fuji first, because obviously one of the biggest news for the last 2 years is that there is a shortage of Fuji cameras. And this is nothing to do with just about the chip shortage, the manufacturing side of it, but it's the actual demand of it. Rod knows that you can't get hold of any X100 cameras at all. It's very difficult in the UK. I know you may be able to get something around the world, like from overseas sellers and whatnot. But they are definitely overpriced because of the demand issue at the moment. And whether you are willing to pay for those prices to get an X100, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, which version you want to get, is going to be above average used price that you normally see 4 or 5 years ago. And why is that, Rod? Why is suddenly a huge demand in something like the X100? You talked about other Fuji cameras as well.
Well, it's bizarre, isn't it? And by the way, I'm just checking on MPB now. A like new X100V is $1,449. And when I bought one 2 years ago, it's $1,300. So it costs more 2 years later used than it sold for when it was new. I sold mine, so I didn't particularly like it, but that's another story. But Fujifilm is a very interesting point, isn't it? Because Fujifilm practically invented the modern retro camera, and now it seems to have rather dumped the idea, I would say, prematurely. I don't know why the X100V is in such short supply, but I suspect there's been a thing at Fujifilm where they've said, oh, this whole retro camera thing, that's done and gone. Now we need to go mainstream. That's where the market is. I know that is the reasoning behind the S10, which is much more conventional mirrorless camera, and the XS20 and the XH2 models as well. They're much more conventional. So it's almost as if Fujifilm thought, right, now we're ready for the big time. We'll ditch this silly old retro stuff and go mainstream. The trouble is, it was the retro stuff that people wanted. Yeah. And, once Fujifilm went mainstream, those old retro cameras became hard to find. And the newer models are so similar to what other manufacturers make that people are saying, oh, you know what, I might as well get Canon or Nikon or
Yeah.
Panasonic or OM System or any of the others. So it's interesting. Yeah. So I don't know why you can't buy the X100V. I suspect they stopped making them a couple of years ago, thinking nobody wanted them. And I think the same thing has happened to the X4.
Right.
So that's the kind of compact rangefinder version, the XE4, sorry, I should say. I think they thought, do you know what, this is old fashioned, let's dump it. And you can't buy them anymore. And when you can buy them, they cost more than when they were new.
It's interesting, right? Because the retro theme has always been the Fuji niche in a way. That's how they came into the market. They came in as a retro looking cameras, pretty much like Olympus. Olympus started the pen, the original pen, and digital cameras, and subsequently the EM5, which is the retro style SLR shape mirrorless cameras, and then upgraded from there. It's weird when a company is starting to distance themselves from whatever to make them famous and known in the first place.
Yeah. I think Fujifilm just jumped too soon. They were right about the demand, but they just got the timing wrong.
I mean, funny you mentioned that, because I had the suspicions that OM Systems is doing very similar thing, and we're not seeing a successful for Pen F, for instance. We're not sure whether the pen line is still alive or not at this moment in time. I know we had the OM5, which is essentially the EM5, still the retro looking mirrorless cameras. You can't really consider EM1 or the OM1 is a retro style looking, although it's kind of resemble an SLR more than any other competitors out there. I mean, certainly for me, it definitely look more like a old style SLR than anybody else's. But yeah, it seems that even OM System is kind of slightly moving away from that retro thing, even though they started it pretty much like Fuji did. Sure. It's kind of weird. And now if you look at the likes of Nikon, for instance, and Nikon is going backward. They're starting to think that, or maybe it was an experiment for this ZFC. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Let's test the water a little bit to see whether the retro market is here. They did try the DF before. Remember the DSLR? They had the DF, which is almost like the FM series, but 2 times the size and 2 times the weight.
Do you know what? I did look at the DF. I had a bit of a hankering to get the DF, but then I checked, and I think possibly you get a kind of knock-on effect, possibly because of the ZFC. Is really pushed up the prices for the DF. So now, if you want to get one in excellent condition, you're up at nearly £1,000, which is quite a lot for a camera that for a 16 megapixel camera. It's a nice camera, but it seems a lot because it's been a while since that was out new. So I think it's like a halo effect from the ZF.
and in that case, what does it tell us? It's certainly there is a demand. Certainly, people want retro-looking cameras, especially one that functions well and capture good images. I don't think people really care about the top end functionalities and features. Nothing like people who buy this sort of camera. They're not looking for a lot of AI stuff. They're not looking at global shutter. They're not looking at ultra burst rates. They're not looking at any of those stuff. Right. This is a camera that they can carry on the body that looks good, and occasionally snap a few photos that, look, I've got a proper camera here. And, with all due respect, I'm not trying to distance themselves, but we do need consumers like these to buy cameras, so then camera companies can make money and make more cameras and make more lenses. So I think it's a good thing that we now know that the demand is here for retro cameras. But the things that we just talked about, Fuji is kind of almost exiting this area. And OM System starts doing the same thing. And I can't see Sony or Panasonic will enter this because they don't have any kind of relevance to the old-time styling, because they don't have the history behind them. And the only thing that you may have is Canon. Canon still has some old cameras that people can reference to, like the AE1 or the A1 cameras in the past. And we can't forget about Pentax. Pentax is still in the DSLR era, so they're not moving away from that. So they can still make some old retro-looking camera if they really want to. And what else I'm missing out? Well, Leica has always been Leica, I guess.
Panasonic did in the very early days, make a kind of classically designed camera. It was the L10. L10, if I got that right.
The
At least 10
L10.
years ago,
Right.
external exposure controls like more modern retro cameras, um, and definitely quite quirky. But
Mm.
they've moved away from that and gone very much into kind of typical DSLR styling. But Panasonic did have a couple of goes that's something a bit more out of the ordinary. But it just
Right.
seems to have stepped away from that now. Um, as for the rest, I don't know. I can't really see. I could be proved wrong. I'd be interested if Canon did produce a retro camera. It just doesn't quite seem Canon's style to me as a company.
No, but then again, I guess if Nikon is the only company pushing the retro line, which seems to be at the moment, and
Well,
at the end of the day, it's all about numbers, right? If they're starting to gain a lot of new customer, not switchers, I'm talking about new customers coming out from nowhere, and these are the people that the camera industry should attract, not trying to have a bloodbath, between them, trying to fight for each other's company, because like there are so many full frame cameras now, and there are so many different brands, trying to target the same audience. You're trying to recycle what's available, trying to recycle customers in the pool. You need new people coming in, and at the moment, I think that's a struggle for any manufacturers right now, right?
I think so. I think a lot in the kind of new influencer economy, cameras have to look good.
Yep.
The actual content creator is the subject, and the stuff they have is a reflection of their own tastes and style. So that's why they'd rather be holding a Nikon ZFC than a Nikon Z50. Same camera, just more mainstream styling. And why they'd rather be seen with an X100V than some other Fujifilm camera because it looks good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Andrew here says, when does retro stop? Should we have a box brownie or folding bellows? Funnily enough, for Christmas, my wife got me a couple of vintage cameras because I like to collect them. I do have a box brownie, and I do have a folding bellows camera. It takes 126 film, 127, 126. Awkward. But the thing is, I mean, it's a good point. These old cameras don't do even the tiniest fraction of what modern cameras do. They wouldn't be suitable anymore. But they have some interesting design features that make you think, for all the things we've gained, there are some things we've lost. So I've got this Bakelite box brownie, which could not be simpler. It hasn't even got an interlocking film wind and shutter release. But it just makes it a very simple mechanism. The shutter button loads up the shutter. So the shutter isn't cocked except by you pressing it. It's so simple.
Well, it's certainly interesting. I mean, Robin has a point here. I mean, I'm just going to bring him his...
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's here. I mean, I think like photographer loves the cameras. The retro style works because they look so different from the boring crop of stereotypically styled modern black box camera. And it is true. Everything is so black these days, and then it really is kind of boring. And I guess this is the thing that we're talking about right now, is that we photographers, people who've been playing around with cameras and shooting around for the last 2-3 decades, wouldn't care too much about styling in a way. We just want to go out and shoot photos, right? But like I said, again, like the industry is fighting with these existing photographers within the same pool. And we're not attracting new customer who use traditionally buying point and shoot cameras. But that market is gone. It's been taken away by smartphones. But we need new people coming in. We need to grow the market, not, cannibalizing whatever's within it at the moment for the last 10 years. Nothing has expanded. It's actually shrinking, if you look at the total number of people.
So your worry is that the camera makers are shrinking their own market by becoming progressively more mainstream, but they're also specialized at the same time, because the only reason to buy a new camera these days is for burst speeds and for video and for AI autofocus.
Oh no,
And if you don't really need any of those things,
Yep.
which I'm going to stick my neck out and say almost all amateurs do not need those things,
Nope.
you've lost even what audience you had, and you're left with just a small hardcore of early adopters who need all this power.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the mainstream stuff is good. Is they're pushing technologies forward, but again, those are really gunning or aiming at people who are already in the industry, who already know what they're doing. And we need people who have absolutely no idea about photography. We need people to get a camera because of, oh yeah, I want that camera because it looks cool. And then this is the kind of like the entry point for them to get into the proper photography world using a proper camera.
Do you think there's also scope though for camera makers to make cameras which are just simple? Instead of trying to load them up with gadgets and bells and whistles, which is off-putting, which is why people stay with smartphones. Could you not have a modern equivalent of a box brownie, where all you do is look through a finder and press the button, and there's nothing else to know?
It could
potentially almost have
work.
to take stuff away to make it more attractive.
And to be honest, I mean, you got that point right there. And if I go outside and ask people who are not a photographer, just go on the street, just ask people, do you know AR subject recognition? Do you know, global shutter? Do you know this and that? We know, but then none of them would have a clue what is that about. What is that? What is that? Is it for like a surveillance things? No, it's a camera.
So you want to shoot video. Do you need 10-bit S-Log3? And they'll say, "Do I need what?" It's like a foreign language, isn't it? It's becoming extremely specialized.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trouble at the moment. Like all camera manufacturers now are having all these jargons, the technical terms that sounds all really glorify things and making it dress up only for those people who know exactly what they are. But people outside of the industry have absolutely no clue. But aren't these people are supposed to be attracting, a company attracting to buy the camera, buy the lenses, get into the ecosystem so they can upgrade when they grow and they will learn about photography or video, whatever. But at the moment, they're not doing their job. Even with entry-level camera, which doesn't really exist these days. And that's the trouble. I think that they're not attracting new people. They're not attracting new photographers or trying to educate new photographers at all.
I think if you want to tempt people away from smartphones with cameras, I think it's not just a case of making something more powerful and more technically, off-putting.
Yep.
You have to make a product that's better at the job. I mean, the old point-and-shoot camera is gone, and they weren't great anyway, just be fair. But if you could have the modern equivalent of something like the Olympus Trip 35 or
that would be nice.
maybe a box brownie, it's just something not very expensive, but desperately simple, but actually produced quite good quality. And I think the thing about cameras is that a lot of people like devices with very clear functions and only do that one thing. I think people like cameras because even though the phones take pictures, they know that's all the camera does. There's nothing else to confuse them. I think there is still a market for simple cameras, but I don't think any of the camera makers would ever believe it.
No, unfortunately. And I would say, even with majority of the people who buy cameras these days, they still stick with auto mode or P mode, because simply it's ease of use. They just want the computer to think of everything for them. It's a bit like a smartphone, point and shoot. They're still thinking, even if buy big cameras, they still have that point and shoot mentality. They just want to pick it up, turn it on, and shoot. I want a good picture, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest, very often, that's what a lot of us want. We don't always have time or the inclination to take a lot of trouble over every single photograph. And sometimes it is, if you trust your camera to get it right, it is nice to just point and shoot and not have to worry about it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as a photographer, professional, you point and shoot as well. We just have to make sure that we know the composition right. And in fact, you can take great photo with a point and shoot camera, a very simple camera. If you know your photography, you know how to read the light, how to compose your photo, and how to execute the photography. Robin also have a subsequent thing as well about, but if everyone does retro, then it becomes a mainstream and it loses its charm.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually disagree. Because the thing, listen out, because I think, I mean, like you all said already, current cameras are very boring looking. You know, you look at the likes of Sony cameras. You know, all the Alpha series. You know, the A7, A9. They look practically the same. You know, for the last how long? 10 years now? I don't know how many years. They haven't changed the design. They still look the same. It's really, to me, it's just boring. And if you look at like Panasonic cameras now, they are very much the same as well. You know, throughout the entire range. And I don't know whether it's cost cutting or whether it's design thing. I'm not entirely sure. But if everybody does retro, and this is another opportunity for not camera engineers but camera designers to do something that they probably enjoy doing. And I guess it'll be interesting.
I agree with the argument that if something becomes common, it's no longer different. I agree with that, but I think you can use retro styling as a label for just more inventive camera styling.
Exactly.
And I think you could have 10 retro inspired cameras that all look completely different. Whereas if you follow the mainstream of camera design these days, they all look the same. In the early days of digital imaging, hardly ever did you have two cameras that looked the same. Whereas now they all look the same. So it's as if the makers are just being incredibly conservative and focusing ever harder on an ever shrinking audience.
I mean, as someone who enjoy or appreciate industrial design, whether it's you know, just a simple phone or computer or anything with the design elements into it, I appreciate those elements, and I really want to see more designers actually working in the camera industry, bringing us, you know, some kind of quirky, cool looking cameras than the boring old back blocks like everybody says just now. You know, I remember Pentax had that kind of colorful looking DSLR before. I can't forget the actual name of it. That was quirky.
KS1 was that?
Yeah, I mean,
even had lights on the back for various functions and purposes.
That's a quirky camera, and that's a quirky camera. I think that more should appear in the industry, and just make it fun, right? You know, make something fun.
If you could still buy the Nikon Coolpix 900 or 990 with a modern sensor, that would be quite tempting. Have you ever used one of those?
No, I haven't. Oh, the P9. I have. Yes.
No, not the P900. The Coolpix 900. It's basically the camera in two blocks with the swivel.
Right. Yes, I remember the really old one, right?
Cupboard. Yeah, but it's actually it's a very physical thing. There's no tiny, delicate little fiddling. You just get a real old wrench to point it where you want it to go, and it's a really effective design. But nobody's thinking outside the box anymore. Everyone's well and truly inside the box.
Yeah. Well, that's you got a point there, right? You know, it's the beginning of the digital camera evolutions. You see that camera manufacturers were really trying hard in the design. They try to make something work, and then like they have all kinds of solutions trying to do vari angle, but at the time we didn't have flip out screens, so like you said, you have the swivel thing, you know, like just kind of turn it physically. You know, then you have for instance, the Olympus Air, you know, the one using the smartphone as an interface. So it's the Sony Q1, basically the same thing, and you know,
XO1.
Yeah, DxO1, exactly. All these kind of weird cameras came out, and we need more of these inventions. We need more of this thinking, like you said, outside the box. They may not be successful, but hey, you know, that's part of the process, right? And they're all gone back to the same old black box these days, and it's kind of lost that exciting elements. You want people to see it and just, oh, that's cool, I want to buy it, and they need something like that. And I think currently, at this moment in time, the retro thing is definitely those kind of cameras that kind of get people buying them.
Yeah, and I think as well, I don't know why people seem to have a downer on cameras that look good.
Yep.
But we don't criticize people who buy nice cars or nice clothes or nice houses.
Yep.
With all of these different things, you buy something you like to have and to own and to use and to look at. It's no different with cameras. Why should it be?
Nope. Absolutely. And I just saw another comment here, and Chrono Craze, do you think Nikon might someday bring back digital rangefinder? You know, it could be interesting if they do that. And so is, I think Corey or someone actually said that Canon also had rangefinder. That's back in the 60s and 70s when they were competing with the Germans, when they were competing with Leica and Zeiss. And so they brought out a lot of L39 mount rangefinder lenses to compete. They also obviously made the body to compete with the Leica counterparts. They are basically the same cameras, and even the styling was very similar to the original, the 3F and 3G cameras from Leica. So, you know, it's a very not very efficient rangefinder cameras, but you know, it did the job. And some people are still lusting over some of those old Canon and Nikon rangefinder lenses because they apparently are very, very good. I haven't personally tried them. You know, I only tried Zeiss and Leica lenses. You know, I know that Canon had the very famous dream lens, I think that's what they call it, the 50mm f/0.95 for the rangefinder. That is, you know, appreciating in values almost every year. I think you can't even get hold of the original rangefinder coupled lens for less than £3,000 these days, and which used to cost about, even at the time when I was playing around with cameras, still really cost about £800. I think that has appreciated threefold, you know, and in terms of price these days. Yeah, imagine that. Just go back to the topic, you know, like imagine Canon and Nikon both bring out their rangefinders back in the mix.
That would be wonderful, but I think there's a technical issue there in that if you're talking about genuinely coupled rangefinder cameras, that requires a lot of very precise, very expensive engineering. Whereas today's cameras are based largely on motors and circuits and algorithms. And it would be much more tempting for Nikon or Canon just to use a regular autofocus setup than it would be to reinvest in the rather complex and delicate optical machinery of a proper rangefinder. It's probably why Leicas cost so much. Part of the reason.
Indeed. Well, then again, the likes of Chinese manufacturers doing the couple lenses are about a tenth of the cost of the Leica lens.
Now, funny you should mention that. So I bought this Voigtlander. I've got it's in the Leica M mount, but I've got an adapter for my Sony. That has that couples with Leica rangefinders. So that should work. But I think the cameras themselves, the rangefinder mechanism, because this is a tiny mirror on a pivot, it has to be so precisely calibrated. I don't think camera makers really want to get involved in that kind of fine engineering if they can just use electronics.
Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, but what I'm saying is probably more styling issues. I mean, I doubt that they will definitely go all the way back to having a full mechanical rangefinder. But what if they do something like the Fuji, like the X-Pro series, for instance? You know, having a rangefinder style digital mirrors cameras, so they can still use the existing lenses on it, and that would be phenomenal, right? And that will give Fuji a run for money, you know. If imagine that, you know, because they definitely have the resources. All they need is to put their bloody sensors and circuit board in a rangefinder style body, and then they have all the lenses there. But then again, let's talk a little bit about lenses, because we now talk a little bit about lenses. I think something is lacking currently in this modern retro styling camera world. Let's put it that way. That we now have lovely bodies now from ZFC, the Nikon and ZF, Fujifilm. Obviously, they still have all these lovely bodies. The XT5, XT4, and then also the X-Pro. I know they stopped making them already, but you can still buy them. And like the Olympus or whatever, they're all great looking cameras, all really cool retro looking cameras. But we are lacking retro looking lenses. Nikon try some. They have a couple of what they call the SE special edition lenses that kind of mimic the look of like the old AI lenses or AIS lenses, but they're nothing like it. They're completely plastic. And they put a premium of £50 on all the lenses compared to the same version, but it's not retro styled.
It's just a paint job, isn't it?
It's pretty much the paint job, yeah.
Bit of a vinyl wrap, like a vinyl wrap for your car.
Exactly that. But what we need now is maybe perhaps manufacturers to invest a little bit more money and get something proper. And a lot of these older style retro looking cameras, they aren't designed for big lenses. And unfortunately, this is what we are going to talk a little bit about now. Because I love my ZF, the Nikon ZF that I just bought. I love it. It's a full frame camera, it's good styling, and everything's good. But I can't use any new Nikon lenses because they are simply too big for the body. And the ergonomics of the body aren't tailored for big, heavy lenses in the front. And you simply just can't hold it properly or comfortably for over 3 or 4 shots because they're just becoming unbalanced and the grip just not there. You can get additional grip for the body, but it kind of destroy the aesthetic of it. You buy the camera because it looks cool. If you start adding stuff to it to make it handle better for bigger lenses, and kind of defies the point. And why don't you just buy a Z6 or Z6 II or whatever, other things. And similarly for other camera bodies, it's the same thing. And but fortunately, like Olympus or OM System and Fujifilm, they are tailored for that kind of sizes. And for instance, the OM5, for instance, they have the 1.8 primes, which are tiny. And but when you start throwing a 1.2 prime into it, and once again, it becomes too big and front heavy. Fujifilm is the same thing. They have the brilliant f2 prime lenses. They are quite nice and tiny, and they fit well with the XT bodies and X-Pro. But once you get put into the 1.2, 1.4 lenses, they once again becoming too big. Now what we need is a bunch of new lenses that are tailored for these type of bodies. If the demand is there, if they continue to sell well for the companies, they should start to have a look at, okay, maybe we should create a line of lenses that is not only high performing, that can be obviously cross used for other bodies as well, but style to the retro kind of crowd, for the retro style camera bodies, so make them look good but handles well, take brilliant pictures, small, light, compact. And I'm not talking about cost. I don't know how much they'll put a premium on if they do something like that, because it will be lower volume than a normal kind of range for sure. But that will be interesting, right?
I think some of these lenses do exist, but they do kind of highlight the fact that these days we want too many things at once. So one of the reasons why lenses have got bigger, I think, is that we want faster, quieter, more responsive autofocus. That tends to mean larger AF actuation systems. And also it means you have to have rather more complex focus groups. It's not like the old days where you could just rack your lens in and out and that's focusing.
Yeah.
Now you have to move internal elements. There are some Sony lenses, and probably others besides, have 2 focus groups that move in unison but separately. It's a very complex thing. This doesn't make lenses very small. So I think manufacturers are also aware that if they release a lens that isn't a 1.4, they're going to get slated. And if you do make a small lens, for example, Sony makes some really rather nice full frame primes. There's a 24 2.8. There's a 40 2.5 and 50 2.5. They're very small. They've got aperture rings. They focus quickly and quietly. But then it becomes apparent that that's only achieved using quite strong digital corrections. So the 24 millimeter uncorrected isn't really very usable. So we want too many things at once. And if we do get them all at once, we end up with big lenses because they have to be big to do this stuff.
Yeah. Well, funny that Andrew actually said that if I want something retro and, for full frame retro cameras, I'll suffer in lens choice. You're quite right there. However, if you don't mind not getting the latest and the greatest in the, that's currently available, you can have a look at some of the older lenses. Even if you do get slightly less like optimal optical quality from the lens. For instance, I'll give you an example. I mean, I was looking at Sony E lenses, like you said, Rod. I didn't like a lot of the current Nikon lenses at the moment for my ZF, funny enough. And it's because, first of all, they are really humongous. You know, they're big. Even the 1.8 primes are big. I don't know what the heck is going on with Nikon, but the lenses are big.
Yeah, I know.
and second,
it's not just Nikon, not just Nikon. Yeah.
Yeah, but then the second thing is they are extremely expensive. You know, like you are talking about crazy monies here. A 1.8 51.8. These lenses used to be dirt cheap. 51.8. You can get in the DSLR era. You can get one for, I don't know, a Canon one for about 150 quid, 200 pounds, and you can get one from other manufacturers for similar sort of money. But these days, a Nikon 51.8 will cost you £480.
There's my Nikon DSLR one.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's 220 quid. That's my 51.8.
No, the newer one I think is even more expensive. And
that's what I mean. This is 1/4 the price of the Z version.
Yeah, the Z version is extremely expensive for what it is. So I started looking at alternatives, you know, and lucky that I got the new adapters from, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's actually a pretty cool adapter. So I can use any Sony E-mount lenses on the Nikon Z cameras. So it's a very thin metal thing, but it actually lets the Sony E camera digitally connected to the Nikon Z camera. All functions is working, like including iFocus, autofocus, CAF, everything works. I mean, I don't know the speed difference because I don't have a Sony camera to compare with, but it works fine for me. You know, I've been using the Sony 50mm 1.8, which cost only £130 last year in Black Friday, so I bought one. £130. So like, even without Black Friday discount, it's only £150. So Sony has something to offer in terms of value. And also, if you look at a lot of these Sony lenses as well, I mean, sorry, and like I said, the Nikon 50, let's say if I want to go faster, if I want to get a 1.4, 1.250, and the Nikon, the jump from 51.8 to the 50, they don't have a 51.4 at the moment. You have to go to 51.2, which costs you almost $3,000. So like, there's no middle ground anywhere there. And also the 51.2 is extremely huge and heavy. Like, even if I can afford the lens, I just think that it's not going to be for my ZF. It's just way too big, and it's not going to be a great lens for me to use. So then I look at the Sony, because now I got the adapter. Sony has 51.8, which I bought already. If I want to jump up, you know, I can have either two different versions there. I have the Sony Zeiss 51.4, which is about $1,000. And then I can jump up to the $2,000 mark, which is for the G Master, the 1.4 G Master. And I know the G Master is going to be more superior in sharpness and details and things like that. But hey, I mean, like the ZF is only 24 megapixels. It's not something that's high resolutions. I don't need that resolution. So the Zeiss is actually pretty good. You can get a second hand for 600 quid. So it's actually not a bad 51.4. You still got a pretty good center sharpness there, wide open. If you stop down to 2.8, you get edge to edge. So it's actually not a bad lens at all. So I guess to answer Andrew's questions there, you can look past that. If you somehow manage to find a compatible lens or something to make your lenses or camera compatible with each other, and you may actually have some more choices than you may think. And even something like menu, you know, we talk a little bit about menu lenses. There are absolutely a ton of menu lenses available now from Chinese manufacturers like TT Artisan, 7 Artisan, and even Viltroxes now. They have AF lenses that are on the cheap. So like, there are other options, and if you don't want to get if you don't mind getting non-native brand lenses.
So you mentioned those Viltrox lenses. A friend I met up with the other day, he also tests lenses. He had a ZFC, and he's used pretty much all of used and reviewed pretty much all of the Viltrox primes, and he really rates them.
Yes.
Yes. And of course they've got aperture rings and everything else that we like to use or like to have. So I think in a way the third party makers are doing the job that the camera makers probably should have done. With your ZF, have you, just going off track slightly, have you considered the 24 to 70 f4 retracting zoom?
I was thinking about it, but I'm still more of a prime guy, and not sure if I want to get it. The only zoom lens that I've got for the ZF is the 70 to 180 millimeters 2.8.
Yeah.
So that is actually a size of the 40 to 150 2.8 in Micro Four Third, about the same size and same weight. So it fits in my bag quite nicely, and although it doesn't have the same reach, but then it's still a 2.8 lens. It's still a relatively good portrait range that I can use for people and some kind of distant candid shots. So it's not a bad lens at all, and it's relatively affordable, you know. And I bought it secondhand for 900, so instead of paying, I think 1,050 or 1,800, I can't remember, 1,100. It's still a lens that in high demand. It's structured quality. I mean, like the compromises between size and weight and cost. Because I know the 70 to 200 millimeters 2.8 VR, that lens would cost $2,500. So I'm not going for that.
it's also the size of a fuel tanker.
Oh yeah,
it's huge. It's huge.
I mean, if Nikon's listening, I mean, can you tell me why all your lenses are so big? You know,
well,
I can't believe it.
I think what's happened is all the makers have got caught up in this kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not a war of attrition. It's the opposite thing. It's like an arms race.
Yeah.
Every lens has got to be better than the last, and the unfortunate side effect is that every lens is bigger than the last as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's just where we're at. But I think Chuck said something a few comments back saying manufacturers are also worried about focus breathing now too. So now I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about that, because I think it's one of these things where a problem has been exaggerated in order to sell more people a more expensive solution to it. I can't remember ever seeing any film clip or movie or TV program where I thought, oh my gosh, look at that focus breathing. I mean, I personally don't feel it's a thing. But if Sony tells people it is, it will sell more cameras, won't it? Or more lenses.
Well, I guess, you know, for the trained eyes, and you would definitely notice breathing, especially when you rack focus for these ultra shallow depth of field or long lenses. Most of the time you won't realize it, and it is a problem if you use it in that way a lot. But you know, nobody would rack focus like for every single scene and every single angle, so definitely not. But I have to say though, you know, like now on this particular breathing issues, is that not many people actually see it or know is that Olympus lenses, most of the Olympus lenses are actually pretty good with breathing issues. Actually, they're none, basically. What I'm trying to say is a lot of their MG core lenses, especially in the last 10 or so years, and most of them are very, very good in terms of breathing. I haven't seen many with severe, you know, breathing issues for any sort of scenarios. All the 1.2 primes are pretty good, and then all the 40 to 150 I've tested, they're all really, really good. Same thing can be said with some of the Panasonic lenses, and also now with Nikon lenses, I've seen they got quite a bad breathing as well, and depending on how you use it. So it's actually something to note that, you know, like Olympus engineers actually did pretty good job in that regards for the lens design. So it sounds as if you're probably more sensitive to focus breathing than I have. And just to clarify, it's not an autofocus thing. It's the magnification of your subject changing as the focus changes. So you rack focus in and out, whether you're doing it manually or with AF. If you move the focus closer, your subject could start looking smaller or bigger. Now, it's just a visual effect that some people won't notice or care about, but it's the kind of thing that once you've seen it, it can just start to niggle you a bit. But I don't know. I know that Sony's solution is to design cameras and processing that can recognize the lens, know the breathing characteristics, and can compensate in real time with a slight crop. I cannot thinking, wouldn't it have been better to design a lens that didn't have the focus breathing? But you know, let's all go there. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. But you know, like, and you can correct breathing in post. It just it's just
it's
more
not.
work. It's basically what Sony does in camera, and you can do it with the editing software, but it creating more work, and also crops in, like you said, crops in a little bit more. So if your composition is very tight already, so like having a crop may actually work adversely to your video. But anyway, this is something to note, and breathing yeah, sorry.
How many people full focus? That is a skilled job. It's not something you can really do as a solo shooter.
No.
You really have to have a separate camera operator, and they have to know their stuff. So it's not a mainstream problem, really.
No, it's definitely not for day-to-day or consumer at the consumer level. It's only for proper filmmaking, film crews, people who work in the cinema industries, and those are the people who are worried about focus breathing. But to be honest, I think, like you said, somehow lens manufacturers and manufacturers themselves are glorifying these questions and and trying to make you think, I definitely don't need breathing. I definitely don't need them. And I
mustn't have any focus breathing. Yeah.
but not many of us will actually use that.
But it does add to the cost and complexity and the size of lenses. All these things that we decide we have to have.
Yeah.
We're paying the price, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, if you want everything, in a lens or in a camera, it becomes such a burden, financially. And if you want to chuck everything into it, and then you have the weight penalty, because if you want everything, we can do it, but just becoming massive and heavy and costly.
Yeah. So is this part of our modern problem that we want everything? The thing about retro cameras, if you can buy a camera 10 years old, not necessarily because it's a retro design, but you can buy a 10-year-old camera that does what you need perfectly well.
Yeah.
Because it's only in certain areas that cameras have moved on. So I don't know. I think there are lots of issues tied in together. There's whether cameras are advancing in the right direction, whether they've all become boring, whether there is a long and persistent market for retro designs. But I think behind it all, I think what has happened is that every camera has become the same.
Yeah.
Whereas in the early days, it was as if camera designers had been liberated and could make anything, because the new optical pipeline didn't have the same constraints as old-fashioned cameras.
I like your word liberating. I think we need to be liberated. And I got a comment here from George. I see plenty of young people with their phones, and but why should they ever buy a proper camera? That's a good question, and this is exactly why we want to have this discussions here, because I think retro camera is, because of the styling of it, is making people want to get them, whether you like it or not. Whether however you want to call these people, like hipsters, fashion people. I'm not one. They whether they use the camera as an accessories so they look cool on the street or not. But these could potentially be someone that could take it up as a hobby once they got the camera, because they want to snap around. People might start to have a conversation, and they start looking at it, and somehow they might got into it. And then this is the thing that we've been kind of talking about for the last 45 minutes, is that in general, the camera industry now fighting with the same photographers who's been in the industry, or in there for the past 30, 40 years. We've been around. The pool is the same people. We are fighting for the same people, switching brands, doing this or adding cameras, buying more cameras from different brands and lenses. But we don't have any new bloods in the industry. We don't have any new people, young people buying cameras. And like you said, people with phones. And this is the people that used to be in the camera industry because they were buying point-and-shoot cameras. Because now phones can take photos, they thought, this is my camera. But there are also they are also the people that we want to attract them back to the industry. But what can we do? How can we do that? I think the retro camera could potentially be that gateway or that path for them to get back into the industry, back into the camera world, to buy a proper thing. Whether they use it or not to take some meaningful photos or not, that's not a problem, I think, because most of the people, like Rod and I talked about, a lot of people would just simply want to point and shoot cameras, even if they've got a big camera these days. I buy a new camera for my holiday, and expensive £2,000 cameras with a kit lens. think, it will take better photo for me when I go on holiday. And but yeah, they may not actually take it as a hobby. They just think that a better camera, more expensive camera, will take better photos. But we don't mind that, but we need people buying cameras so companies can make more money, so the chemistry can grow again. If you have more people buying cameras, that means more people could potentially upgrading in a few years' time, potentially getting more lenses because they need them. And who knows, but I think it is an arguable a question. What do you think?
I think you should start a campaign, Jimmy. I think your campaign should be called "Make Cameras Cool Again."
Oh yes.
I don't think it's just a young audience. I think there's an audience of all ages that would appreciate having a camera that was straightforward and basic and simple, because I don't suppose I'm the only person who likes to have one device for one function and another device for another. I have a phone which does practically everything, but I don't find that useful. Being able to do everything seldom helps you do any of those things. Suits me much better. You have a phone to phone people, and you have a camera to take pictures. It's a simple separation of function that I like in a physical device, and I don't suppose I'm the only person either.
Yeah, and it's quite funny as well, man. I think the Blue talked about young people don't have the disposable income to buy into a camera system and versus using their phone. You will be surprised about how much disposable income they can get out of the pocket. They can buy a £1,500 iPhone and they can spend some expensive money in buying designer clothes and bags. They have disposable income somehow, don't question where and how they got it, but they do have it. So if they want an X100V, they buy it for £1,400. They buy it just because it looks cool. And I think that you will be surprised exactly how much money you can take out from them. But obviously, joking aside, there is a mean. I think that if they want something, it's something that attracts these young people, they will buy it. And especially these days, camera companies or finance companies, camera retailer has all sorts of finance schemes, and it's not really that difficult to buy an expensive cameras. And then don't forget that, these people who buy this camera may not need a £3,000 lens. They don't need them. They just need them to look cool. So most likely they're going to have a kit lens. They're going to have a very small prime, for instance, a 52.5, for instance, like from Sony. Something small, something relatively cheap. Even a kit lens, like I said already, like the 12 to 45, whatever, from Olympus, or something similar in full frame terms. A retractable zoom kit lens, 3.5 to 5.6, nothing expensive. It's fine. Something to slap onto the body. It works fine for them. They don't need something for sophisticated because they don't know how to use them anyway. So with all due respect, these are the people that we may need for the industry to get the whole thing going again. And this is how we all started, right? People originally back in the 1560s, they're buying consumer level cameras like the Olympus Trip, for instance, all these things. They want a day-to-day camera, something simple, like Rod said, I don't need anything manual override. I just need a shutter button, click the shutter, takes photos, and that's it.
Yeah,
but at the same time, at the same time, it looks cool. The Olympus Trip was a cool camera. Like hipsters had them. All the fashionable people had them. Family had them. Like the Olympus Trip was one of those fashionable cameras, and we need fashionable cameras in the industry to get going for people. And if they somehow loved photography because they started using the cameras properly, you never know, they might upgrade. And so this is how the camera industry grows and grows and grows, and I'm hoping to see that happen, because at the moment we don't see that. And you read all the reports for the last 10 years now, camera industry is shrinking and it just doesn't grow. Because why? There's no new people coming in and buying new cameras.
Make cameras cool again. That's
Make cameras cool again. That should be our next banner.
I've discovered that if you want to buy an Olympus Trip 35 now, it'll cost you over £100.
No, no way.
Privately, you can get them for less, but it depends on, you don't know what kind of state.
£100 for an Olympus Trip. It was like a £30, £20 job from a charity shop.
Yeah. I paid. I think I paid about 40 for mine and gave it to my daughter in the end. I thought that was plenty, but yeah. Gosh. No, it depends. If you go to a private bar and you pick carefully, you can still get them for like £30 or £40, I think. but they're a real hipster thing. You can buy a whole lot more if you want to.
Yeah. Chris also
I
actually
think,
shared it. Yeah, sorry.
I was only going to say, I think the Trip is a very good example,
Yep.
because if modern digital point and shoot cameras worked in a way the Trip did, I think they would still be more popular today. There was nothing clever about it. You just had a fixed focal length lens, so you had to stand in the right place, basically, which is what photography is.
Yep.
You just frame your shot in a viewfinder and press the button. There's nothing else to do or that you can do, and I think that was fine.
Well, this is why there is a cult following with the Ricoh GR series. You know, that's basically a trip camera with a fixed focal length, slim body.
It's got a bit more, but yeah. And also somebody earlier on mentioned the Nikon Coolpix A. That's a very good camera. Shame Nikon gave up on it. That was, I think that was sold at the time for about half the price of the Ricoh. But no, you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we're living in the past, apparently. Yeah.
And Andrew just said that I'm a hipster.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. My kids call me a hipster for similar, because I'm just a bit stubborn about not using popular things.
Yeah.
Apparently,
and you know what? Yeah.
Apparently that makes me hipster.
I mean, I have to say that, you know, ever since I got I got into this retro thing, you know, from the days of the EM5 and then the Pen F, and recently with the ZFC and the ZF, every time I take this camera out, you know, regardless, seriously, I'm not joking. I walked in, because I go out a lot in the morning, early mornings, shooting people around. People always talk to me when they see the camera, and they always come up to me and, what kind of camera is that? You know, it looks really nice. They create conversations, you know, and I think this is something that camera manufacturers may not understand or fully appreciate, exactly what these cameras or these type of cameras has done for them. And I know we had an early conversation about saying the Fujifilm and OM system may kind of distance themselves from the market they originally created, like retro styling cameras, and whether they had jumped too quickly, you know, away from it, or whether they are actually waiting for something to happen, because everybody, especially like Olympus or OM system fans, fanboys and fangirls out there, they will be looking at, when OM system will create the Pen F Part 2, you know, the successor for the original Pen F. I want one, seriously. If they really gonna make one, I would jump on it without a second thought. You know, I would just buy whatever the money it is. Just take my money. Just give me the camera. And I would like to have a Pen F2. I don't even care about the specs as long as it's a new camera. And it is what it is.
Has anyone here used Hasselblad X1D? Or let's see what else I could suggest. Fujifilm GFX 50R.
Yep.
Because those are very interesting cameras. The Hasselblad in particular is not remotely practical, but it's a rather wonderful thing to look at and use. I'm not sure I'd call it a retro camera, but it is an example of a maker producing something that is definitely not mainstream. No. And I wonder as well is if people have struck up conversations with you based on your camera, Jimmy, it's probably not beyond the realms of possibility that having gear like that can get more work, because you become known for it, or you have a particular set of kits.
I mean, it certainly has its niche, and to be quite honest, you know, I was known for using small cameras, and you know, people may not understand what I was using. I mean, obviously, I was using Micro Four Third, but all my customers and know that I operate small cameras and still take great photos, and that's kind of my reputations. And I don't need massive, like, giant white lens from Canons like the 70-200 or anything big, massive, basically. And because I remember in the old days, and when I was a Canon guy, I mean, I had the Trinity of pro lenses and plus a couple of primes, and they were massive and heavy. I always have two bodies with me, and I have the 70-200 swinging around, knocking things down. It's just not pleasant. And ever since I switched over to mirrorless and downsizing my kit and gone into Micro Four Third eventually, and I'm starting to build up this reputation of having small stuff around me. And I just go into a wedding with a small backpack, and people don't even believe that I was a photographer. And many actually questions, are you a guest? I just it's just a quite funny comment. But then again, and you can build up a niche if you use a slightly quirky, slightly different camera to everybody else's. Certainly, if people notice, of course. If they don't and they don't care, and it does really no harm. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think everybody's shared our comments quite nicely here. Make camera great again, and because no one used the cool word apparently.
Well, no, so that's the thing, George. If we can't say cool, tell us what word we should use. All right, and then
yeah. We'll change up. We'll change the banner for you. We'll even name you the contributor for that.
Can we still say deep or strong, or is that gone?
Deep or strong?
Deep and strong, yeah. Catch up, Jimmy. Yeah, that's the thing.
All right.
Everything in my daughter's life a few years ago was deep or strong, but I don't hear that now, so maybe that's gone.
I have no idea. My kid's still too young to pick up any sort of words, so I'm pretty sure soon I'll start to experience them.
Yeah.
And Chuck it here, saying that I have the EP7, which is similar form factor, but is missing a few bits. However, it always seems they find a way into into the back because of the rectangular design.
It's bizarre. I've got an EP7, and I'm exactly the same. I mean, it's got no viewfinder. That's terrible. But I just like taking pictures with it. So what does that tell us? I don't know.
And Mark Hassler is here. I got called hipster for using a Lumix S5 with a Sigma lens. No idea. Strong and stable. Andrew just replied.
Strong and stable. Yeah. I don't know what that is in reply to.
All right. Keep the you talk about deep and strong, I think, and
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's strong. And my daughter never quite explained to me how one thing could be strong and one could be deep, and what the difference was, which is quite definite. You would use one and not the other.
Right. Chris actually say that cool is one slang word that has survived since the 1950s. That shows how cool it is. Brilliant.
To find out what it means.
Okay, well, while Rod is talking about searching for the meaning, and so let's talk a little bit about you guys, and how many of you like to use a retro style cameras? And for obviously, if you're Olympus guys already, you might have used EM5 or the Pen F or the Pen series cameras. They're all kind of retro looking thing. Do you mind using them? Do you like using them? And I'd like to hear from you guys as well. And because I personally think that they are pretty cool. And I mean, they have sort of design quirks that doesn't work well with larger lenses. And let's don't forget that. So if you use a retro looking camera, and most likely you're going to use a prime. In the Olympus world, you probably use these 1.8 primes, like the 17-25 or the 45 1.8 primes, or Panasonic equivalent. And in the X-Pro, the X World, the Fujifilm, and you most likely use also smaller primes as well instead of the big zoom lenses that they have. And likewise, the latest releases from Nikon, the ZFs and ZFCs, and I also use smaller primes because I just don't think they handle well with bigger lenses. It's something that that's my personal experience, and I don't mind it actually, because I like using small primes. Because what happens is that, yes, you have the convenience when you use a zoom lens, for instance. 24-70 2.8 in the full frame, cool, magnificent, it does it all, Swiss Army knife. But at the same time, I can use a 1.8 primes, 2 or 3 of them, 35 or 50. Does the same job as the 24-70, because I tend to use my leg to walk around to take photos anyway. If I don't get close enough, I get closer. I actually walk closer to the subject instead of zooming in, and or change my focal length if I really need to get different compressions and different effects. Similarly on the Micro Four Third, and I don't mind using primes at all. And many of you already know that I'm, most of the time, I'll say 80-90% of the time I shoot primes. That I'll only use zoom if I need to get really close to a subject that I can't do with a prime. And this is another thing, obviously, that we don't have long primes. The longest prime that Olympus make, for instance, is 300 f4. You can't get longer than that, and otherwise you're getting into crazy territories and very expensive. So you have to get zoom, and then zoom you have 100 to 400, and which is equivalent to 800 millimeter focal length in full frame terms, and similar things with full frame cameras as well. They have big, massive, long focal length, but most of them, if you want to reach, you have to go for the zoom instead of the prime. So yeah, that will be interesting to hear from you guys, or whether you do like using retro style cameras, because that's the whole conversation today, right? And if you guys do like to use them, let me know, and what sort of camera you are using or enjoy using as well. Have you found out what the meaning is?
No, I think she's winding me up. I think she's using deep to describe. So we're looking at pictures. She'd say, deep. So I think that probably means it's profound. And if she said, she might say, oh, strong.
Yeah.
And I'd say, do you mean deep? No, strong. And I think that probably implies something that's quite vigorous and energetic.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think she's just taking a mick. I don't know. I think those are real words, mind. But I always used to use zoom lenses because everybody did. It's only fairly recently the primes have become a thing again, I think. But I figured,
you think so?
Actually,
you think so?
I think so. But I figure as well that I realised that when I was using zooms,
yeah,
it was always at the extremes of the focal length. So if I bought a full frame 16 to 35.
Yep.
It was so that I could shoot things at 16 millimeters. And I didn't really use the rest of the zoom range very much. And if I had a kit lens, I'd be most often at 24 millimeters, the widest end, or maybe 35, occasionally 50. And it dawned on me that why am I buying these big, massive, expensive, slow lenses and not primes? So one of my more recent acquisitions is that, which is the Fujifilm 8mm f3.5 for my XT1, and it's that big. Now Fujifilm also an 8 to 16 f2.8, and it's 4 times the size. It's only about twice the price, but it's 4 times the size. So it occurred to me that if I buy a wide lens to use it as wide as it can go, why don't I just buy prime that's wide?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's why, like, for me, when I go out to shoot, I tend to take 2 primes, and in my Micro Four Third bag, it would be the 25 1.2 and also the 45 1.2. I do have a wide lens, and sometimes I swap between 45 to 17 depending on whether I need to shoot group or single individuals. So I do swap them around, and then I have one zoom, which is the 40 to 152.8. In my full frame bag these days, if I use a full frame body like the ZF, for instance, I would have the 50-1.8, I have the 70 to 180-2.8, and also have the 28mm 1.8. So again, I shoot prime mostly, and majority of the applications would be prime only, and if I can get away with it. Sometimes I just needed the reach, and that's when the zoom comes in, and so that's the only time I carry a zoom, just for kind of like a backup thing, that if I have to reach something that I can't reach with physical primes, or the distance, or where I can't physically get to, then I would use a zoom. But yeah, it's interesting. I just had a question out there earlier to see if anybody loved retro cameras. Corey is the first one to say that I love retro style cameras. And let's see what Andrew said here. I don't really care. Yep.
So Yume's got a Nikon F3. I remember the fuss with the Nikon F3 when that came out, because everyone was appalled that it was a professional camera that had to have a battery to work. I think my memory serves me correct. Everyone was outraged.
The F3 can function without battery, right? It's a certain
shutter
speed.
It's only got a couple of shutter speeds, yeah.
I think 1/20th or 1/60th. I think, I can't remember. One of the shutter speed is mechanical.
And then people were saying, God, that means in a year I'm going to have to put a new battery in. So we've come a long way, haven't we? Now we need to charge up once a day or twice a day.
And Andrew actually said, I don't really care what the tools of my tray looks like, as just as long as it performs. Well, I mean, mind you, if you're already playing with the cameras and shooting long enough, yeah, I would totally agree with you. You know, and but yeah, like I said, you know, we I think the retro style cameras are really gunning for people who aren't playing around with cameras, and people who are, well, there are two types of people I think retro cameras are gunning for. One is obviously new people, haven't used cameras before. They just want to buy into the system, a bit like entry-level cameras. This is one kind of get them in and buy them and just start playing with them, even though at a premium because you're buying for the look. And the second group of people that they're targeting is people like me, you know, who wants a bit of nostalgia. Is something that it just kind of make you think, oh yeah, I mean, I miss the good old days of the Nikon FM or the original film Olympus OM1 or the Canon AE1. You know, those cameras that I operated back in the days with the film and things like that. I just kind of miss that the tactile feeling of the metal bodies, the slim, square, horribly handling bodies, and but all the controls, physical controls on the top plates and kind of thing. It just makes me feel a bit happier, you know, just seeing older cameras kind of reincarnated into new body and just kind of like a living again.
I think you're being a bit unfair to yourself. I don't think that is nostalgia. I think that is simply preferring a different design. And I don't really think that's anything to do with nostalgia. It's having a preference.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. I think we are living in an age when electronic devices do not necessarily have the same handling qualities as the mechanical devices that we used to use.
Yeah.
And I think we're quite entitled to prefer some things over others.
That definitely. I mean, like you said, Yumi has said that about the F3, and he also uses the EM5 Mark II, which to me still, I think today the EM5 Mark II is totally underrated. It's definitely one of the best micro four thirds cameras. You know, it is. You know, I think it was one of the first cameras to have the 5-axis stabilization, which really blew me away when I first tested it, and it was just amazing. You know, and I never thought that I would see something that stable before. So like that really shocked me. And then we got Andrew also replied afterward and say if you want to go retro, just use an old camera, and why not just put a roll of film in it. I do have film cameras.
It's the film though, because if your client wants the pictures that same afternoon and wants to choose from 5,000 of them, film isn't quite so practical, is it?
No, but I guess you know what he's talking about is probably just going out and shoot, and I would.
It's
and,
a hobby thing,
the problem is, and it's probably by the time you rack up about like, I don't know, 50, 60 rolls of films, you probably can buy a camera for that price. So that is the problem at the moment, is the cost of buying the films and developing them. I don't mind the weight. I don't mind the quality. It's just a simple cost thing.
Well, sooner or later, you're going to have to get them into your digital workflow as well, which means scanning or paying somebody to scan them or what have you. You can't put a print on a website.
No.
It's just not straightforward enough for... It's okay as an occasional hobbyist thing, I think, but I don't think shooting film is practical these days for most people, particularly since it can be quite hard to find anyone to do the developer printing, and at a cost which is even remotely palatable.
Well, I mean, I guess that it really depends on where you are, though. I mean, I know in the UK and I think Europe in general that film for professionals are getting like definitely very rare these days, and because of the cost. However, I know that it's a fashionable thing to do in the States. So if you're in the US, you often find wedding photographers now shooting with films, and especially 120 films, and they charge a fortune because they have to cover the cost of the films and developing afterward, and also the time to digitize them and whatnot. But yeah, apparently it's a trend. So like Americans seems to be able to afford these sort of thing, and while we can't. And this is something interesting to note.
I think as well, I don't think it's right to lump nostalgia in with camera design. I'm not concerned myself with nostalgia. I'm concerned with how cameras work. Yeah. And I find that the way certain retro, I mean, I call them retro, makes it sound like nostalgia. That's not what I mean. The way some older cameras work suits me a lot better. Now, I don't think that's nostalgia. I think that's just a preference.
That could be true. I think that I guess that I do miss the SLR clunky thing, the mirror flipping, and it's certainly a preference for sure. And we got another comment here, like you use the XT10 with the 27-8. It's always in my backpack.
Yeah,
and something that is sure.
You wouldn't think so to look at it. That's in my opinion, that's a rather exceptional lens.
Yeah,
it looks like something and nothing, but I think it's the best of Fujifilm's primes for edge to edge sharpness. This is what I mean about preference. So that's an XT1.
Yep.
And you might argue that's a nostalgic hipster camera, but the fact is it's got ISO dial, shutter speed dial, and aperture settings. That's how I like to shoot. I'm not trying to recapture some misty-eyed lost era. That is how I like cameras to operate. So I don't feel that's nostalgia.
I guess you're right. I mean, that's why I like the ZFC and the ZF, because they have all the physical dials on top of it instead of going through the menus or using the dials. Maurice Hayes here. I when I take the Pen F with the 70-1.8 pool parties and a lot of people buy my drinks and girls love it.
Do you know, if that works, I'm going to go on MPP and see if I can get one. But then I'm not very often in LA. The kind of pool parties I end up with might be with grandchildren at the Municipal Sports Centre, which is not some way you take a camera. So we'll gloss over that.
And JMT here, his choice of retro cameras are the XT2 and X-Pro 2. Nice. I like the X-Pro. I think they're definitely very cool looking cameras.
Yeah. I never quite got on with the hybrid viewfinder though, because I always ended up using it as an EVF. Because I found it too much of a muddle having both. And it just messed with my head in the end.
I guess, like Fuji, when they first designed the X100, the original X100, which is the first hybrid viewfinder, I think they just wanted to prove the point that they can do something with a traditional optical window into something that can turn itself into a rangefinder optics in a way and digitally. I find it quite interesting. It's certainly not practical, and I did try to use the X100 when they first came out, and like you said, I couldn't quite get the point. Like the optical viewfinder wasn't as bright as the Leica, but when you turn into EVF, it's a bit laggy and also not as bright as a traditional viewfinder. It's kind of like, not really special enough or good enough to be both. You
kind of wish they'd done one or the other, then you could have accepted it.
Yes.
So, for example...
But that's where the XE come from, right? The XE is just a pure EVF.
Yeah, it's not not brilliant one, but yeah. I mean, the thing about the limitations of the direct vision viewfinder are that you can't really use wide lenses.
Yep.
Unless you pay silly money for some viewfinder you have to put on the top of the camera. So that is always going to be the limitation of the X-Pro Series 2. It wasn't the same limitation for the X100V because it only had that 35 millimeter equivalent lens. I don't know why Fujifilm didn't just go for broke and not have the EVF.
No,
just go for it. Have the bright line viewfinder, but that was, I think, the kind of weakness there. If you're going to do these things, choose one thing and do it. Don't hedge your bets and do a bit of everything.
And that is probably what Fujifilm has realized. And that is stop making the X-Pro.
Perhaps.
And Mark say the retro cameras are great. If I buy any more, I might get a divorce. Oh, that's funny. Right, Christopher, and then Jimmy put the 85 1.2 LFD on the ZF. It's fantastic. Hey, funny you just mentioned it because I have it right here. I have the legendary 85 millimeters 1.2 FDL. So
The
yeah,
FD lens.
this is the FD, and it's
I didn't know
just
there was an 85 1.2 FD.
just look at the front element. It's just massive. Look at this. Look at the size of this hole. It's just like a black hole, sucks all the lights in. It's just amazing. And just look how thin it is. You know, the actual barrel itself. It just, you know, just crazy. If I just open up, so you can actually see. Look at that! Look, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, I think that optical engineering is just like phenomenal. Okay, it is not the sharpest lens I've tested in the past. I mean, this is look, this is an 80s lens. It's not really like tailored for modern digital photography. And I have used it on the Leica M, and also like used it on the Micro Four Thirds cameras, which basically becoming 170 millimeters, which is quite long. But on the full frame Leica, it looks magnificent. I haven't tried it on the ZF yet, but I will take a word for it. I'm going to try it on the ZF once I get the adapter. Yeah, it's a phenomenal lens for a lot of money these days, because this lens is not supposed to be that expensive, but I think it's now becoming a cult lens. Now a lot of people trying to get this lens now for that particular look. This is something we are going to talk about maybe in future series of the chat room here about retro lenses, because look is something that also a very special categories or special area that we should be discussing, because many people may not actually be aware of this, how special it is and how difficult it is to get a lens to look the right way or look something that you enjoy. Most of the modern lenses these days are clinical. They are ones and zeros. They are designed to have the optical perfections with no aberrations, the sharpness, edge-to-edge sharpness, something that can resolve, I don't know, 5 million lines, you know, from inches away. You know, that kind of thing we're talking about. And they are really looking into optical perfection, but nothing about characters. And I think they all look very similar these days. No matter how you look at them, I've tested quite a lot of modern lenses. I think that they are very similar in a way that you can talk about the autofocus motor speed, you can talk about flare resistance, you can talk about other things. But when it comes to resolutions, I mean, they're all very good. If you spend like £3,000-4,000 for a lens, you know, they're all very, very similar. But one thing that they can't have is some of the old gems, you know, in the past, like the 85 1.2 here, or even some of the Chinese lenses like TT Artisan, 7 Artisan, some of these manual lenses you can get for cheap. They all have characters. They all have something that unique about them, even though that you may not consider them as good. And but for a lot of photographers out there, and I think that even filmmakers, and sometimes they're looking for that particular look in their projects, and that is something that older lenses and some of these character Chinese knockoff, whatever you want to call them, and are pretty good. You know, like that's why I actually review a lot of these Chinese lenses, because I kind of like the look of them, which kind of bring it in line with the whole retro thing, because they do look old. The rendering's old.
So I spent my whole career basically with modern digital lenses.
Yep.
And not really having any sense that lenses could have any particular character, because none of the lenses I got to review or use with cameras all through this time, all the mainstream lenses, had very much the same sort of rendering. Some of them weren't very good at the edges or had corner shading. None of them had what you could call character. Until I got to review a couple of Leicas and Summilux and Summilux or Summicron lenses.
Yep.
They are not by modern standards optically perfect by any means.
No.
But they have a character that I hadn't seen before. Yep. And even though you can't measure it and put it in lab tests, these things do exist. I mean, to a lesser extent, this Voigtlander lens I've just bought to use on my Sony, it's a pretty basic old school lens design. I think it's only 7 elements in 6 groups, which is almost nothing really, and it's certainly not optically perfect. I mean, the edges aren't terrific, and there is some vignetting, but it has a character that it's. So this is a 35mm full frame lens. I have others that don't have this look, and it's a very beguiling thing. It's got a look that's almost film-like, and I can't really express it any more clearly.
No,
it's very contrasty. Very contrasty lens.
It's definitely something that is kind of interesting because, like, you know, the likes of DP reviews, DxOs, you know, they measure with the labs, you know, depend on, you know, looking at sharpness and aberration values and all the other parameters that they can, like, basically report in numbers. But look is something that is intangible. It's nothing that you can measure. It's something that gravitates you into the whole aesthetic of the images that it creates, which is something quite interesting. I have another lens here which is quite special. I mean, this is kind of like the knockoff Leica lens, but it's actually pretty good. It's made by TT Artisan. It's extremely tiny. It's a rangefinder, couple rangefinder lens. It's the 28mm 2.8, and see how tiny this thing is. And it's phenomenal. This little guy here.
I've been looking at that, Jimmy. Is it good? I've been looking quite closely at that lens.
It's good. It's really good, actually. Because the Leica version would cost you $2,500, and I actually tested that lens, that very lens, when it first came out. But I just talked to myself, you know, I'm not gonna spend $2,500 on a lens that isn't gonna pay itself back, basically. And but something like this is cheap, you know, and
is that TT Artisan or 7 Artisan?
This is TT Artisan. TT Artisan.
Okay,
and it comes with a brass metal lens hood, which Leica would charge you another 500 quid. So like the 500 quid for the lens hood from Leica will buy you the entire set here for maybe you still got change left. And so it's actually a pretty funky retro lens to play with, and if you have the budget. And because it's the 28mm, you can actually adapt to micro four thirds to become more like a standard lens to play with if you want to look for the look. And it also, because of the crop sensor, you can crop out all the deficiencies on the edges. And because this thing shoot wide open, which is 5.6, will you have some kind of softness and aberrations on the corner. But in the full frame, you have a special kind of definitely old school look to it. So if you kind of like that, this one of the recommendations I would definitely recommend.
I mean, what I find with the Voigtlander is, I don't know whether it's because the optical construction is quite simple.
Yeah,
it's quite a high contrast lens.
Yeah,
and it also has a subtle shading effect towards the edges, which is very reminiscent of stuff I used to shoot on film, because that's how lenses were back then. They didn't have the same evenness of illumination, but very often this subtle darkening can really enhance the composition and give your pictures even more contrast, because you've got much more graduation of tone in your image. It's not obvious. It's not obvious where you say, oh, that needs fixing. It's just a subtle effect that really enhances a lot of images. And it's really quite appealing.
Yeah, I mean, like, we can definitely talk a little bit about lens design. I think it's quite interesting to understand, especially now we talk about retro lenses, because we can talk about secondhand lenses you can buy on eBay or other secondhand markets. You know, getting some of these old school 60s, 70s, 80s lenses and use it on modern digital cameras, because they all have different characters and properties that you may or may not aware of. Because some of the lenses back, especially in the 50s and 60s, there were lenses that are designed specifically for black and white films, because back in them days, most of the negatives were black and white. None of them were colors, or very rare in colors. The lenses were tailored for behave in a certain way for black and white films, not for colors. And only back in the only down to the 80s when you start to have multi coatings, and this is to enhance contrast for color films, and that's starting to change the whole look and feel of it. So if depending on what era, what sort of lenses you're buying in the past, and they all have different characteristics that you can exploit for digital photography, and which is very, very interesting, because I've tested quite a few of them, and I do find that they all look very different, and you have to process them in different ways. You can't use the same method, same presets that you have used in the past and apply to all the vintage lenses, because all of them can look dramatically different from one to another. And so yeah, we can have a whole topic about that later, maybe even show you some sample photos for certain lenses. I saw Andrew talk about Helio 50, and have you got any encounter with that particular lens, Rod?
I haven't, no. Would that be an old Russian optic from for the
from
Zenith times?
Yes.
Yeah, I did have a Zenith EM at one point, but their lens was a Helios, but that went with the camera when I sold the camera. I saw Christopher made a very interesting point, Christopher Rodriguez, saying
Yeah.
he doesn't need or want perfect images. He just wants to look, feeling a character out of camera with no need to create it later. That's exactly right. And this is a curious thing about this lens I just bought. It gives me that. It's not as good as other 35mm lenses I've got, but the images I get from it are so much closer to the character I want than I get with other lenses. Isn't that a curious thing? I don't know what to make of that, but
it is. But, I mean, I think we are all facing the same thing now. Since that everyone is listening, all the like modern advertisings and all the latest reviews on camera lenses, all the sample images that they showcase, they all look pretty much the same. Ultra sharp, punchy sharp, pin sharp, everything just sharp, and there's not much to it. You don't feel something about those photos that they took. You're not like some of the things that you, let's say, read from a photo book from these old master using the older lenses back in the 60s and 70s. Look at all these images that they create. It's just, I feel something in these photos. They look different. They look amazing. They look cool. And I think this is something we are now looking into now. And I think there is a market for these things. And I think this is why a lot of photographers are buying these sort of cheap Chinese lenses just to play around with them, to create images that nobody else has, and because they're so cheap and you can easily afford them as a kind of like a secondary system in your camera bag. When you're feeling it, you're going out to create some images, you just take one of these out, and they only cost about 50-60 quid. They're not expensive, and it's quite easy to play with. And even if you're like what Andrew was saying, you go on eBay, get a Helios, and the Helios probably cost about 20-30 quid as well. And so a lot of these older vintage lenses are relatively cheap, unless you're going for the branded kind of like the Holy Grail or whatever people are raving about these days. And those are when you start paying premium, like these 85 1.2 L here. I mean, I remember the days when I first bought these guys, and this was about, I don't know, £300-400. I don't think you can get them for that price anymore, and you probably have to pay $1,000 almost just for this. So things have changed. Unfortunately, people have made some of these lenses popular, and to the point that now everybody's fighting for it.
Well, you just had to be a bit more careful about what you choose, and if you find a good one, tell no one.
Well, tell us so we can get them too.
But I think there are modern lenses that still give this look and feel. I think I might go and check out this TTR design 28mm. What I'm moving towards here is, I think if you get say a modern vintage lens in a Leica M mount, you can get an adapter to put it on just about any mirrorless camera. So I think the Leica M mount is not the L mount, the M mount, the rangefinder mount is probably quite a good common denominator for retro lenses these days. But you can get other stuff. You can get, so I've got an adapter for M42 screw onto Sony, and I've got this is a Pentax K1 for Sony cameras. You can get an adapter to fit practically any old lens onto a mirrorless camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Corey, for just want to say a quick thank you for Corey saying that please like this video. help us get notified. Thank you, Corey. Yes. I just got the same filter as you as well, the M42 to Nikon Z, and I'm going to test the bubble lens. I think you guys may have heard of it, the bubble lens, and so I haven't even opened the box yet, but then it looks interesting from the sample, so I'm going to try to create some bubbles and to show you guys later. It's the thing about adapting lenses. I think we are living in an era now with mirrorless cameras that can literally adapt any lenses to it, and I think that's good news.
I think we just had to get used to the idea we have to focus again now. And we've had it too easy for too long. We just have to remember to focus.
Well, in a way, I guess that we are lucky to have the digital mirrorless cameras, because like in terms of manual focusing, it's much easier than DSLR, for instance. You know,
Right, practically impossible with the DSLR. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you try to adapt old lenses to DSLRs and use the optical viewfinder to do any sort of manual focusing, forget it. You probably get it all wrong.
You have to use that old technique of focus in and out, try and gauge the blur, try and find the middle, and hope that's about right. But it's quite slow and it's not accurate.
No. So we are lucky that now all mirrorless cameras now have focus peaking, have magnify, you can punch in to check focus all around the frame, so not just center. So like it's good. I mean, like now we can finally exploit all these old lenses to see exactly how good or how bad they are. So that's really good.
Turns out my old Pentax 50mm 1.7 I had back in the day, I thought it was pretty terrible. Till I got the right adapter and put it on my Sony and focused properly. Turns out it's actually rather good.
That's good.
I have to eat my words. It's actually rather good.
Well, I have a whole bunch of these old Pentax 110 camera lenses. I don't know if you remember them.
No.
I have the entire I have the entire set. You know, I'm a bit of a collector for the 110, and so I have the whole set of Pentax 110 camera lenses. I did put a adapter mount on my Micro Four Third because it's roughly about the same size as the negative, and to be honest, they are quite bad.
Are they? You don't say.
The thing is, I mean, they look pretty good on the 110 films, and but when you put in digital and trying to like even using a 16 megapixel sensor, it just looks horrible. And I mean, I would say they look old, and it's a bit halo going on, and you can't change aperture. Remember, these lenses were fixed aperture 2.8, and so you can't even sharpen it by stopping down. Nothing you can do. So you always shoot 2.8 aperture. Everything just looks a bit soft.
I don't think those lenses had much to live up to with 110 film, because the film it wasn't kept properly flat in the cartridges anyway. So I think as a format unit, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, even with 35mm, depending on your camera, you can get some bowing in the film, in the camera.
Yeah, you do, yeah.
And you kind of get focus areas in that way. So I think in that respect, the better cameras keep the film flatter. But, you know, the 110, that's very brave buying that 110 stuff.
Oh, well, you know, I just fancy the look of it because it's kind of cool, tiny SLR looking camera with interval changes lenses. It looks cool. It looks cool. And I don't know why I bought into it. And I bought one, and then I started to buy more, and like 2 years later, I have everything you can imagine in the 110 world.
Pentax tried again.
Are they?
Digitally, didn't it? With the 110 film, but with those
what was it called? The Q system, and Pentax Q.
Yeah, almost as bad, but it didn't stop them doing it again.
Almost as bad. I like the sound of it. But then Nikon tried it as well. Nikon tried the 1-inch sensor, which is a small changeable camera, the Nikon One system, right? And
I've still got one. I bought a Nikon One J1. The thing is, it's actually a good camera, but like Fujifilm, Nikon jumped ship too soon. If Nikon had hung on until the current 1-inch 20 megapixel sensors came along, which are quite good sensors, that would have been a good system. But they got scared and ran away too soon.
Yeah.
But the J1 and the V1, the first ones, very nice little cameras.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, this is the problem of the camera industry in general. You know, they're either making decision too late or too soon. Nothing seems to be on time.
No, that's right. I think Nikon did. Did you ever get to try the Nikon One AW1? It was waterproof and shockproof.
Oh yeah,
a mirrorless camera you could drop from a height of 2 meters.
Yeah. Well, Leica made one too, remember?
Oh, the underwater one.
Yeah, the APS-C sensor one, which is quite big and chunky, but then it's quite rugged. You know, it's waterproof. You can dive in it, and but they killed it too, and which I think was a bit of a niche because you don't get a large sensor rugged camera that often, and that was kind of the only one at the time. And
I think
unfortunately,
so,
they
yeah.
killed it. Unfortunately, they killed it, and not making any new replacements. And I don't see they will make one either, because they literally killed off all the APS-C sensors, Leica, and
So-
they don't make them anymore.
So do you think if I put my Nikon One on MPB, I'll get twice what I paid for it, or do you think I won't?
Well,
I
first
don't
of all,
think I will.
first of all, we need to hype it up in this channel.
I'll fetch it out for our next chat, and you can all decide. But it's a nicely made little system.
Do you have
Not the-
Do you have that fancy prime? I think one of the primes were like a f1.2 or something. Really
No,
expensive.
I didn't. I just had the 10 to 30 zoom,
Right.
which is like 28 to 80 equivalent, and the 10mm 2.8. So that's a 28mm equivalent 2.8. That's a nice little lens.
Yeah.
But the styling of the
Yep.
V1s and the V1 and J1, the first iteration, absolutely bang on, utterly minimalist, and
Yep.
nicely made with nice materials too.
Ah.
But then they got scared and messed it up.
Well, that's the problem now. Now we have the technologies, we have everything we needed. They should really revisit all these kind of quirky thing that they didn't quite made it to the masses, and then they should really relook at it. Like we talked about the similar thing about Panasonic too. They had the GM1 and GM5, which is the tiny little micro four third
How
cameras.
small were they? Yeah.
They were they were smaller than point and shoot cameras, and they have a big sensor. You can change lenses. They should really revisit those cameras as well. Just make them again, and they now have 20 megapixel sensors. Now they have more technologies, more speed, and more powerful processors, and so not everything. So like they can now remake something great, really. And then if they really want to, similar in Olympus, they had the EPM one, which is also quite tiny and small, with a large back screen, which is the largest one I've ever seen in the micro four third cameras. And all these kind of weird cameras that they made before, they should revisit them and just kind of bring them to the market again and see how the reactions like. You never know, it may be instant hit.
The thing is, with today's sensors and today's processors, these camera designs could actually be extremely successful.
Yeah.
Because what killed them back in the day was, I think, the technology wasn't quite good enough. But I think these days it is. Corey had the Nikon One system. I thought I was the only one.
And he has the 18.5 1.8 prime.
No, I never had that. No, I could only dream of the f1.8.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I never really tried the Nikon system, and maybe
I'll get it out of the cupboard for
one.
next time.
Yeah,
I'll get it out of the cupboard for next time. I think it's probably too old to be on MPB now. Let's see.
I think they have some one Nikon camera and one cameras, the 1-inch one. So you may find some there.
Nikon One J2, £45.
There you go. There you go. Let's get one then. £45.
I won't sell mine because they'll probably offer me 15 quid for it.
Well, anyway, that's good. That's a very good chat. I think one last question before we end the show today is that to everyone, if there is one retro-looking cameras that you want to remake in a digital era, what would that be? What would that be? That's a tough choice, right? Just one camera. That
I know straight off
should worth a second chance in the modern digital world.
I know straight off, but do I need to keep quiet till next time?
No, go on then. Go ahead.
Pentax MX from the 1980s. One of the smallest ever fully manual 35mm SLRs.
That's the full brass camera.
A viewfinder the size of your living room window, and really nice controls.
Okay,
that's what we need. But I don't think you could get modern full frame electronics into a body that small. But if you could, that'd be wonderful.
Right, my turn. I'll be medium format camera. I would like a Rolleiflex TLR in digital.
Yeah.
I would love that. I don't care whether it's going to be a Planner 2.8 or just a normal 3.5. I don't care which version. Just give me a bloody digital Rolleiflex.
You know you can't have 6x6 though, don't you? because there are no 6x6 sensors.
No, I don't care. Just give me a sensor in it.
Have to have 645. Have to have 645.
Oh, I would love to have that.
You're really going to go back to the waist level viewfinder, are you? Which is all dark and gloomy and the wrong way round.
I always loved looking waist down. I always love it.
I did.
Yeah, it's the type of shooting that I kind of enjoy doing. Whether I had the tilted screen or not, I just like to shoot from waist level. That's why I love the TLRs. And I had a couple, and I don't use them now because the film's so expensive. But I have a couple of them, and I just simply love it. And I see some people already calling Hasselblad X-Pan. Yeah, I would love to see one too. I think that would be a good one. Good one. But you have the very weird, long, elongated sensor.
Yeah.
Oh, someone say OM10. Okay.
But I think the whole thing about all these cameras we want to bring back is that they were, compared to modern cameras, they're extremely stripped back. They were just designed to do a particular kind of thing in a particular kind of way with no extras.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's what actually appeals to us now.
And Yumi actually had the same thing as me, digital Rolleiflex. Yay, there you go. I got another vote.
But please, no 4K, no AI autofocus.
No,
just a digital version of the camera as it was.
Completely old school we're talking about, just a digital sensor replacing the film back, and that's it. It is what it is, just a photographic camera that captures images and nothing else. I think that will be amazing, and I would love to see some of these things back. Hopefully someone will make a project out of it and just make something like that.
and you're going to stick to twin lenses and a ground glass screen, are you?
Oh yeah, I don't mind those.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah.
And they were big. They were large. So, you don't need an EVF.
They were that big. Yeah, but they were. Oh, the screens were large. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And Leica 3. Oh, John Allen just say Leica 3, 1934.
Yeah. Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to get a sensor in that body though.
Yeah,
that could be tricky.
But also the rangefinder works quite weirdly as well because it's quite tiny windows. It's not easy to actually see. You got one rangefinder window, one viewing window. It's a lot to deal with. Andrew Banner, just give me a digital film insert and I can use all my old bodies. Didn't you see that there is a Kickstarter campaign about this film thing, right? And I don't know if you've seen it. Basically, it's a project invented by these people, so they are creating a digital cartridge that kind of runs around like for any film bodies. It's got a digital sensor there. I'm not sure whether it's full frame APS-C. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's still running, I think, the campaign.
I've seen one that has a tiny sensor that really wouldn't be very useful.
Yeah.
There was a hoax one from a few years ago that never actually existed. I don't know of any others.
Yeah, there is one in Kickstarter. I'm pretty sure there is, and but it's not an easy thing to do because apparently you have to buy the kind of film cartridge. We got a this plastic come out like a film, and then you have a sensor in between, and you have to hook it up to a digital battery body thing, that sits underneath the body, so it makes the camera actually look a lot bigger than it is. And to use that, not a practical thing to do, but I think it's actually a pretty cool idea. Is somehow someone make a smaller version of it and make it work, and that'll be quite interesting. Oh, so Andrew said APS-C. Yeah, so it is. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at that now. I wonder if it's real. Hopefully it is.
I think it is real.
Let's see. Hopefully it will happen.
Yeah. Well, I'll wait until everybody tested first before I part my money for it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess this is the end of today's chat, and thank you everybody for joining us. And it's been quite a fun chat about retro cameras, and we're certainly going to talk a little bit about lenses, and we will talk about individual stuff because we want to make a whole series of it. And I think this will struck the core of many of the photographers out there, and also us in general, because we do like photography and gears in general. I do like vintage photography. I sometimes process my digital photos to look like, you know, some of the older film cameras, and because I just enjoy that process and looking at those old style looking photos together with some of these older lenses, like we mentioned, some of the well, I wouldn't say old lenses, the new vintage lenses by Chinese manufacturers, or some actually old lenses that you can buy these days. So yeah, they are all very, very good. I just like them. So thank you very, very much again for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's chat room as well. And if you do, remember to give us a like and also follow this chat room. And yeah, once again, if you don't already know, you're new here, that this particular live stream can also be listened to as a podcast through YouTube Music app. So simple. If you don't want to see our faces, you can always listen to it instead of watching us. But if you'd like to participate, we are here almost every Wednesday at the same time, 3 p.m. in London time. So thank you very much again, and I will see you all next week. Thanks a lot, Rod, and for joining us, and we will see everybody again. Bye for now.
Bye.